Who was Jim Henson? He was the man behind the Muppets. He was Kermit the Frog. He was Ernie of Sesame Street. But at first, puppets were just a way for him to break into television. That was what he really wanted to do. Although he could be shy, he managed to land a job in TV as a teenager. In college, he got his very own TV puppet show. Until Jim Henson, hand puppets and marionettes with strings were the main kinds of puppets. He invented a new kind, and he gave his puppets a new name, Muppets. Jim was a tall, thin, soft-spoken guy. He looked gentle and serious, not silly. But from the start, his Muppets were wild and silly. Today, his Big Bird, Miss Peggy, and Kermit the Frog are known around the world. He helped make Sesame Street one of the most popular children's shows ever. Working hard made him happy. Jim wanted to make a difference in the world, and he did. Chapter 1. Jim was born on September 24th, 1936, in Greenville, Mississippi. His full name was James Maury Henson, but his family called him Jimmy. His brother Paul was 2 years older. The boys grew up in Leland near the Mississippi River. Leland was a small country town. To make a telephone call, you had to wind up the phone. You couldn't just dial the number. Growing up there was fun. Down at the nearest creek, Jim and his brother went fishing and swimming with their cousins. They went horseback riding and played tennis. Jim caught turtles and frogs as pets. He was also a Cub Scout and had a stamp collection. On Sundays, the family often liked to play a game of croquet. The Hensons were a happy family. They liked to tell stories and joke around with each other. Jim's mom, Betty, took care of the family and house. She played the organ and the family would sing along. His dad, who was also named Paul, was a scientist working for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He studied farm crops, trying to find better ways to grow them. His grandmother was nicknamed Dear. She liked to paint, sew quilts, and she loved to read. Dear encouraged Jim's creativity and self-confidence. She was always ready to hear about whatever he was doing. Sometimes he would show his drawings of imaginary creatures to her. They were monsters, but funny ones with curly beaks and stripes. After he became famous, people would ask who inspired him the most. Jim Henson always said it was Dear. In the 1930s and 40s, families gathered in their living rooms to tune in to their favorite radio shows. After school, Jim liked to listen to The Shadow, a popular mystery show. The Green Hornet was a superhero show. A popular comedy show starred Edgar Bergen and a wooden puppet named Charlie McCarthy. These were all favorites of Jim's. Then, in the late 1940s and early 1950s, something new came along and replaced radio: television. Most families, including the Hensons, didn't own a television. In 1946, there were only 7,000 TVs in the whole country. The first popular kids' TV program didn't begin until Jim was 11. It was the Howdy Doody Show. When Jim was in 5th grade, his family moved. Their new home was in Hyattsville, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. Hyattsville was a lot bigger than Leland. Some people even had their own TVs. Jim begged his parents to buy one. When he was about 13, they did. All the programs were in black and white. Color TVs weren't around yet. but Jim was hooked. When he was only 16, Jim went to a nearby television station asking for a job. He wanted to design sets, props, and scenery, but he would take any job. No one would hire him. He wasn't pushy, but he didn't like to take no for an answer. By now, Jim and his brother were going to Northwestern High School. He got good grades, but art was his best subject. He drew cartoons for the school newspaper. Whenever he could, he illustrated his reports and projects. In the summer before college, Jim heard exciting news. Local TV station WTOP needed puppeteers for a Saturday children's program called the Junior Morning Show. They were willing to hire students. Jim wanted that job. The only problem was, he didn't know anything about puppetry. He'd never been to a live puppet show, but he had seen the popular TV puppet show called Kukla, Fran and Ollie. He borrowed some library books about puppet making. At home in the kitchen, he and a friend made a few puppets out of his mom's fabric scraps. They created a French rat named Pierre, who wore a beret. The idea for Pierre came from one of the cartoons he'd drawn for his high school paper. They also made cowboy puppets named Longhorn and Shorthorn. Jim and his friend took them to the TV station. They got the job. Charlie McCarthy. Edgar Bergen was a popular ventriloquist. Ventriloquists are people who can throw their voices. When Edgar spoke, he tried to make it seem that his words came from Charlie McCarthy. Charlie, a wooden dummy, sat on Bergen's knee. He wore a top hat, satin cape, and a monocle, and was the size of a small boy. Their radio show began in 1936. It was a snappy and funny and huge hit. Charlie was a bratty child who had a fresh answer for everything. When TV became big, Edgar and Charlie appeared on several shows, but they never had a series of their own. Jim admired Edgar Bergen so much that he dedicated his first movie, The Muppet Movie, to him. Bergen's only daughter is actress Candice Bergen. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Besides Howdy Doody, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie was another popular children's TV show. In the early days of television, Kukla and Ollie were hand puppets made by puppeteer Burr Tillstrom. Kukla was a clown-like boy with a round nose. Ollie was a dragon with only one tooth. They performed in a small, box-like puppet theater with a stage. An actress named Fran Allison chatted with them. From behind the stage, Burr operated the puppets and spoke for them. The show first became on TV in 1947 and was a big success. Viewers cared about Kukla and Ollie as if they were real people. After Kukla made Ollie go bald in one show, fans mailed wigs to Ollie. One boy even sent grass seeds since Ollie was green. The show ran until 1957. I'm going to pause here. You can click on Chapter 2 next.